In addition to having error messages in your stored procedures and error handling, you should also include a return code. The return code is used to provide a status to what's going on in your stored procedure. I use this personally to troubleshoot stored procedures or track how the stored procedure is processing. This is especially handy if I can't get access directly to the stored procedures code, which sometimes is the case. So including this extra layer of exposure telemetry is very, very useful, and again, a recommended best practice. It's not too hard to set up either. Let me show you how to do it. So, let me alter the inserts for the customers again, and I'm going to add on, just before the begin try, a new variable. I'm going to call it RC for return code. It has to be an integer. Return codes always return an integer, and I'll set it to a neutral status. Neutral status of 0, and I'm going to do that because later on, if things run successfully, I'm going to set it to a positive status. Now, Microsoft doesn't dictate what numbers you use. You can use 1 million, you can use 1,000,001, you can use 52, 42. You can use whatever you want, but I use +1 for positive outcomes, and -1, or -2, or -3 for negative outcomes. And I'll do that down here in the catch block. I'll have set RC to -1 if something went wrong. Now, we have seen that you can get the error number. So what I can do is, in addition to the error number, I can actually go through and put some conditional logic, which case I go through and say, okay, if the error number was this, then make the return code -1. If it was that, return code -2, and so on. They could match the error numbers, but they don't have to, and I usually like to keep them separate from the actual error number itself. The use of these are almost as easy as creating them, but one thing that I always forget, and I don't think everybody does, but one thing I always forget, is at the end of your stored procedure, you have to add the return keyword to return the actual value. Now, this is always going to be the last statement in your stored procedure. If you put it anywhere else, like you try to put it up here, as soon as it hits that word return, it's out of there. It stops running the stored procedure code at all altogether. So it's always going to be the last one, and try to resist putting return at multiple places. A best practice in programming languages in general is to have one entry point through the use of your parameters and one exit point, in which case you have a single return value. That's a software engineering trick. It's a good one, and is been proven to cut down on the type of errors and make bug hunting, I should say, tracking down your errors a little bit easier, because there's only one exit point that can occur. So once that's made, like I said, it's not too hard to use. What you do is you declare some kind of variable to hold that status information, and then when you execute it, you use the variable in front of the name of the stored procedure with the equal sign. Now, what's going to happen is that the stored procedure is going to execute, and then when it's done, it's going to return that status, that return code value, into the status variable. It's going to pass that over automatically, and you'll see it. Now, I got a +1 because it's the first time I put Tim Thomas with this email. But if I go through and try it again, I get a -1 because there's a duplicate. Now, if I go to the Messages tab, I'll see that what the issue was. But the return status, because I'm using select, shows up here. You may remember that when we looked at the tree view over in Object Explorer, and we said we want to execute the stored procedure. You give it some kind of values. That Microsoft went ahead and put code together like this, in which case they have the return value, and that's what they're using. This is the column alias. This is the value you're getting back. There's a stored procedure. So Microsoft just called theirs return value. I called mine status. To tell you the truth, most of the time I just put an RC, because even though you've declared a variable called RC in the stored procedure, when you declare it outside of the stored procedure, it's a complete different variable in a different spot in the memory, in the computer's memory. So you can actually use RC in both places, and a lot of people do, not just myself. But to make it more clear, I've gone ahead and chosen to use status because that's what the return code indicates. It returns the status of what the store procedure, the status of the store procedure when it finished executing the code. So it takes a few more letters to type out, but it is clearer, and I'm going to go ahead and use that. Also, I'd like you, if you're doing the module assignment, I'd like you to go ahead and use that as well, please. Let's see. Inserting Sue Jones. I should get an error message on this one also because it's got a duplicate. And if I want to kind of get tricky, what I can do is I can do a select case statement and see what the numbers are and then make a little bit nicer error messages. See, the thing is that the person who creates the stored procedures may not be the person who executes it. Quite often, stored procedures already exist and you have to run them. When you do, if you capture the status code, you can go ahead and create your own error message. Let's say they just use the bare bones version, in which case they didn't have anything but just like maybe the ID number, the error number, or the actual message that Microsoft creates. But you would like to create something a little bit more friendly. Well, you can do so when you execute your store procedure by just adding on something like this. Let's check out the case. Let's check out what the status value is. If it's a positive 1, we'll just say insert was successful. If it was negative 1, we'll insert failed. Common issues, duplicate data. Another one that we see like on an insert, it's almost always some duplicate data. It could be other things like they're trying to put in the wrong data type value. But if I'm doing an update, it's duplicate data is common. Another one is foreign key constraint violations. And if I'm doing delete, it's very common that you have an error message that comes up with a foreign key constraint violation. So what I would do is I would run this and I get the nice little error message. And that might help people that aren't really savvy on working with SQL to understand what they might look at to see what's going on. Once again, if you're doing the module homework, I'd like you to use this pattern to complete the creation of your stored procedures and testing of those stored procedures. You know, when I do an insert statement, I can use the identity keyword and the identity function, built-in function, to figure out what the new value was. If you want to capture the value, a new value, and use it in some other part, you can do so by making up a variable and capturing it. I guess I really didn't need this though. So I'm going to declare the status like before. I'm going to look at the contents. Now remember that variables only last for the life of the batch. So if I declare it there and I run that, I see my entries, right? But then when I try to run this without that highlighting that declaration up there, it's just not going to work. I have to declare that variable. So if I want to do this, I want to run the entire thing. I want to run the declaration of the variable and the insert. This should be successful because it's a new entry. I'll select a view data just to see what's in there. Then I'll indicate whether it's successful or failed. And I'll go ahead and show the results of that insert by using the identity function, which will show me the new ID that was added. Remember, the identity function shows you what the ID was that was automatically inserted with the identity setting on that column. I perform an update using the identity, and I perform a delete using identity. And what this means is that when I run it, it will give me a display of my data, my current data, then the insert happens, I see that, then I do an update from Jim to James, I see that, and then I do a delete. And I've tested my start procedure. I've added some custom messages to it. If I try this again, I should see my error message. Insert was successful. Oh, because I deleted it, of course. If you need to test these separately, which is perfectly fine. In fact, sometimes it gets a little busy in here. So you might want to go ahead and put go in there, but that means that you're going to have to copy that code that declares the status. And to tell you the truth, in some ways, it's easier to read, so you might just go ahead and take the plunge. It's also easy and put that in there. It's also easier to test. I can test it with this insert, and this time I can test it. Insert failed. I can go through and do the same thing for my update. Now, this doesn't have a problem per se, but I can test it twice, and I can do the same thing for delete. It's interesting that the status came back as null, but let's see. Oh, I know why. It's because I did not, in my insert, update, and delete store procedures. Sorry about the scrolling, guys. I know that's hard in the eyes. But in my insert and update and delete, I only used the cool error handling stuff and the return codes in the insert and insert alone. But update and delete hadn't had those changes happen yet. So what I get back is just a null value, which isn't very descriptive about what's going on. Oh, it still works, but it's not descriptive. Okay, hopefully that makes sense of how you would add on some custom error messages and how you would execute the store procedure and kind of use the return codes to figure out what's going on in the status and maybe provide additional error messages via that means.